He threw out his Dominican wife and children for a mistress, but what happened years later would shock everyone. The divorce papers hit the marble floor like a death sentence. Camilla Rodriguez Wayne stared at the legal documents scattered at her feet, her hands trembling as the reality crashed over her. For years of marriage. For years of building an empire together. For years of believing that love could conquer anything. All of it reduced to cold, clinical language that might as well have been written in a foreign tongue. Pack your things. You have until morning. Darius Wayne's voice echoed through the mansion they'd built together. Literally built, with her business degree guiding every financial decision, her connections opening doors he could never have accessed alone. The same mansion where she'd held their newborn twins for the first time, where she'd nursed them through fevers, where she'd created a home filled with the kind of warmth her own privileged Dominican childhood had lacked. Hey, my beautiful friends, I hope you are doing well today. Drop a comment, and let me know how you are feeling today and where you are watching from. Let me know how you are feeling about this story so far. And if you haven't yet, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the tension is only just starting to build, and trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. Behind Darius stood her, Jessica Stone, 24 years old with surgically enhanced curves and the kind of calculating smile Camilla had seen on the faces of women who circled successful men like vultures. Jessica's manicured fingers traced the lapel of Darius's Armani suit, the same suit Camilla had picked out for him just last month for the Contractors Association gala. "The children stay with me," Camilla whispered, her Dominican accent thicker now in her distress. She'd worked so hard to soften it when they'd first met, believing it would help her fit into his world. Now she didn't care. Darius laughed, actually laughed, and the sound sliced through her heart like broken glass. "Look around, Camilla. Look at what I've built. What can you give them? You're a cleaning lady's daughter from Santo Domingo who got lucky. I'm keeping my sons." "Your sons?" The words erupted from her throat. "Our children barely know you. When Diego had pneumonia last winter, where were you? When Marco took his first steps, where were you? I gave up my MBA program, my father's business connections, everything to raise them while I made us rich." His gray eyes, the same eyes she'd once thought held such depth, were cold as winter steel. "And now I'm correcting my mistake. Jessica understands what a man like me needs. She doesn't drag me down with her baggage." Baggage. 32 years old, and she was baggage. The woman who'd translated contracts when his English wasn't sharp enough for legal documents. The woman who'd networked with her father's wealthy friends to secure the loans that launched Wayne Construction. The woman who'd worked 18-hour days during their first year, answering phones and managing books, while Darius learned to navigate the complexities of running a business. Baggage. Camilla's gaze moved to the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. Her and Darius flanked by their 3-year-old twin boys, all of them laughing at something silly Diego had said during the photo shoot. Her chest tightened as she noticed how Darius's arm curved protectively around her waist, how his smile had been genuine then. When had that man disappeared? A small voice piped up from the top of the curved staircase. "Mommy, why is everyone yelling?" Diego stood there in his Spider-Man pajamas, his dark curls messy from sleep, clutching the stuffed elephant Camilla's mother had sent from Santo Domingo. Behind him, Marco rubbed his eyes with tiny fists, equally confused by the tension crackling through their home. Camilla's heart shattered completely. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that his world is about to implode? How do you tell children that the father they worship just declared them expendable? "Go back to bed, boys," Darius called out, his voice artificially cheerful. "Daddy and Mommy are just talking about grown-up things." But Diego was too smart, too perceptive. His large brown eyes, Camilla's eyes, darted between his parents, sensing the wrongness in the air. "Mommy looks sad." "Are you sad, Mommy?" Before Camilla could answer, Jessica stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd never been broken by life. "Don't worry, sweethearts. Jessica's here now to take care of everyone." The casual presumption in her tone made Camilla's hands clench into fists. This woman, this stranger who'd been warming her husband's bed for God knows how long, was already inserting herself into her children's lives. "You will not speak to my sons," Camilla said quietly, but her voice carried the authority of a woman who'd been raised in boardrooms and diplomatic circles before she'd traded it all for love. Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Excuse me." "You heard her," Darius interjected, stepping between them. But his protection wasn't for Camilla, it was for Jessica. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Cam. The boys need stability, not whatever chaos you're about to spiral into." Chaos. As if she was the one destroying their family. Camilla looked around the mansion one more time, at the custom kitchen where she'd taught the boys to make her grandmother's empanadas, at the reading nook where they'd curled up for bedtime stories, at the family photos documenting every milestone and memory. All of it felt hollow now, tainted by the knowledge that while she'd been building a home, Darius had been planning its demolition. But as her gaze landed on her son's confused faces peering down from the stairs, something steel-hard formed in her chest. They were watching, learning, absorbing every moment of this betrayal that would shape how they viewed love, commitment, and honor for the rest of their lives. She would not let them see their mother crumble. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her soul. "The boys do need stability. They need a parent who keeps their word, who honors their commitments, who shows them what integrity looks like." She bent down and gathered the divorce papers, each page feeling heavier than the last. When she stood, her spine was straight, her chin lifted with the regal bearing her diplomat father had instilled in her since childhood. "I'll be gone by morning." "But Darius?" She met his eyes directly, and for just a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with. "When this all falls apart, and it will fall apart, remember that you chose this. Remember that you had everything, and you threw it away for..." Her gaze shifted dismissively to Jessica. "For nothing." As Camilla climbed the stairs to wake her children and pack their lives into suitcases, she had no idea that her words would prove prophetic in ways that would shock everyone, including herself. The question that would haunt the next 5 years had already been planted. When a woman loses everything but her dignity, what is she truly capable of? 5 years earlier in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, Camilla Rodriguez had never been afraid of disappointing her father until the morning she told him she was moving to Los Angeles for a man he'd never met. Don Alfonso Rodriguez adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and set down his coffee cup with the precision of a man who'd spent 30 years negotiating international trade deals. The breakfast terrace of their colonial mansion overlooked the Caribbean, where morning light painted the water in shades of turquoise and gold. It was the kind of view that reminded you money could buy beauty, but not happiness. "Explain to me again why my daughter, who graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown, who speaks 4 languages, who has a position waiting for her at the Ministry of Commerce, wants to follow some construction worker to America." "He's not just a construction worker, Poppy." Camilla's voice carried that particular stubbornness she had inherited from her mother's side. "Darius has vision. He's building something from nothing, and he sees potential in me that goes beyond what name I carry or what connections I can provide." Her father's laugh was bitter. "Potential? Mija, you are a Rodriguez. Our family has built this country's infrastructure for 3 generations. What can this man teach you about business that you don't already know? How to build something with my own hands instead of inheriting it." The words hung between them like a challenge. Don Alfonso had worked tirelessly to give his only daughter every advantage, every opportunity, every door that his wealth and influence could open. To him, her decision felt like a rejection of everything he'd provided. But Camilla wasn't thinking about disappointed fathers or abandoned opportunities. She was remembering the night 3 months ago when Darius Wayne had walked into the Hotel Nacional during her cousin's wedding reception, looking completely out of place in his rented tuxedo, but carrying himself with a confidence that had nothing to do with money or status. She'd been surrounded by the usual collection of diplomats' sons and CEOs heirs, all of them reciting rehearsed charm while calculating her net worth. Then this American with calloused hands and honest gray eyes had asked her to dance, not because he wanted access to her family's connections, but because he thought she looked lonely standing by herself watching other people's happiness. "You don't seem like you belong here," he'd said as they swayed to bachata beneath the stars. "What makes you say that? The way you keep looking at the exit like you're planning an escape route." She'd laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Maybe I am. Where would you go? Somewhere real. Somewhere I could build something that mattered instead of just managing what already exists. That conversation had led to midnight walks through Santo Domingo's colonial zone, where Darius told her about his dreams of starting his own construction company, and she confessed her secret desire to use her business education for something more meaningful than managing her father's portfolio. They'd spent 2 weeks exploring each other's minds before they ever kissed, building a foundation of intellectual intimacy that felt more solid than any relationship she'd ever experienced. When he finally pressed his lips to hers outside the Alcazar de Cologne, she'd tasted possibility, the intoxicating flavor of a future she could choose instead of inherit. Now, 3 months later, sitting across from her father's disapproving frown, she knew exactly what that future would cost. If you do this, Don Alfonso said carefully, if you throw away everything we've built for this fantasy, don't expect to come running back when reality disappoints you. The words stung because she could hear the fear beneath his anger. Her mother had died when Camilla was 12, leaving Don Alfonso to raise a daughter he loved fiercely but didn't always understand. Her independence terrified him because he couldn't protect what he couldn't control. I'm not running away from anything, Papa. I'm running toward something. Toward poverty. Toward obscurity. Toward a man who will eventually resent the sacrifices you made for him. You don't know him. I know men. His voice softened slightly. I know what happens when a successful man realizes his wife gave up more than he deserved. The guilt becomes resentment, and resentment becomes cruelty. I've seen it destroy better marriages than yours will be. Camilla stood from the breakfast table, her decision crystallizing with each word. Then I guess I'll have to prove you wrong. 3 days later, she was on a plane to Los Angeles with 2 suitcases and her mother's rosary, leaving behind a trust fund worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. The sacrifice felt noble then, romantic in its completeness. She had no way of knowing that her father's warning would echo in her memory 5 years later, as she packed those same suitcases under very different circumstances. Darius met her at LAX with a bouquet of supermarket roses and an expression so nervous she almost laughed. This confident man who'd charmed her in Santo Domingo was suddenly tongue-tied in his own country, as if her presence made everything real in a way that scared him. You came, he said, and she heard the surprise in his voice. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might change your mind. Realize what you're giving up. She took his face in her hands right there in the arrivals terminal, ignoring the crowds and chaos around them. I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything. Their first apartment was a studio in East LA that smelled like the Chinese restaurant downstairs and had water stains on the ceiling that looked like abstract art. Camilla unpacked her designer clothes into a closet the size of her former walk-in shoe collection and pretended not to notice when Darius watched her face for signs of regret. It's temporary, he said, gesturing around the tiny space. Just until the business gets off the ground. It's perfect, she lied, because she could see how desperately he needed her to mean it. What she discovered over the following months was that love could make anything bearable, but it couldn't make everything easy. Darius worked 16-hour days, coming home covered in dust and exhaustion, while Camilla navigated the complex paperwork of starting a business in a country where her Dominican credentials meant nothing. She'd wake up at dawn to translate contracts that arrived in broken English, spend her days cold-calling potential clients with carefully practiced American pronunciation, and fall asleep to the sound of Darius's laptop keyboard as he calculated and recalculated their razor-thin margins. The loneliness was the hardest part. In Santo Domingo, she'd been surrounded by family, friends, and a social circle that dated back to childhood. In Los Angeles, she knew no one except Darius, and he was too exhausted for conversation most evenings. But there were moments, crystalline moments of pure happiness, that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Like the night they landed their first major contract and celebrated with champagne and takeout Chinese food, dancing to bachata played through Darius's phone speaker. Or the morning she woke up to find him staring at her in the pale dawn light, his expression soft with wonder. What? She'd whispered. I can't believe you're real. That you're here. Where else would I be? Living the life you were supposed to live. The easy life. She'd kissed him then, tasting the salt of his honesty. This is the life I chose. This is the life I want. And for a while, for the golden period when their love felt invincible and their dreams felt inevitable. That had been completely true. Wayne Construction's success didn't happen overnight, but when it came like a flood. Camilla's bilingual skills opened doors in LA's Latino business community that had been closed to English-only contractors. Her education allowed her to navigate complex commercial contracts that intimidated Darius's competitors. Her instincts, honed by years of watching her father negotiate million-dollar deals, guided them away from risky clients and toward profitable partnerships. Within 2 years, they'd moved from the studio apartment to a modest house in Montebello. Within 3 years, they were bidding on commercial projects that would have seemed impossible when they started. And somewhere in that whirlwind of success, they'd fallen even deeper in love, not just with each other, but with what they were building together. Darius would come home every evening with stories of progress, problems solved, obstacles overcome. Camilla would share her own victories. A new contract negotiated, a difficult client managed, a profitable deal structured to protect their growing business. They were partners in every sense of the word, their professional and personal lives so intertwined that neither could imagine success without the other. "We should get married," Darius said one evening as they reviewed contracts at their kitchen table. It wasn't romantic. They were both tired, surrounded by paperwork, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago. But something in his voice made Camilla look up from the budget spreadsheet she'd been analyzing. "Is that a proposal?" "It's a recognition of what we already are. Partners. In everything." She wanted more romance than that, some part of her whispered. She wanted flowers and speeches, and a moment that felt like the fairy tales her mother used to read to her. But looking at Darius across their shared workspace, seeing the genuine love and respect in his eyes, she realized that this was better than fairy tales. This was real. "Yes," she said simply. Their wedding was small, just a few of Darius's friends and colleagues, since Camilla's family had maintained their disapproving silence. Don Alfonso had sent a brief note acknowledging her marriage but hadn't attended, an absence that stung more than she'd admitted. But as she danced with her new husband in the reception hall of a modest hotel, surrounded by people who'd watched them build something beautiful from nothing, she felt complete. She had no way of knowing that across town, a young woman named Jessica Chun was graduating from USC with a business degree and an eye for successful men, already planning the calculated seduction that would destroy everything Camilla had built. The foundation was set, the characters established, and the stage prepared for the tragedy that would test the limits of love, betrayal, and ultimately, the power of grace to transform even the deepest wounds. But first, there would be children. And with children, everything would change. 3 years into their marriage, Camilla stared at the pregnancy test in the bathroom of their new Pasadena home, her hands shaking as 2 pink lines appeared with devastating clarity. Not one baby. The ultrasound 3 weeks later would confirm what her body already seemed to know: twins. "High-risk pregnancy," Dr. Martinez explained, her voice gentle but firm as she showed them the shadowy images on the monitor. "At 28, you're not in the danger zone, but carrying twins puts additional strain on your body. I'm recommending modified bed rest after the first trimester, and absolutely no stress." Darius squeezed Camilla's hand, his gray eyes bright with excitement and terror in equal measure. "Whatever you need. Whatever it takes." "I can't just stop working," Camilla protested. "We're in the middle of the Riverside project negotiations, and the Martinez contract needs." "I'll handle it." Darius's voice carried a confidence that was new, born from 3 years of increasing success. Wayne Construction had landed contracts worth over $2 million that year, and for the first time since they'd started the business, money wasn't a constant worry. "You built this company as much as I did, Cam. Now let me carry it for a while." The sweetness in his voice, the protective way his hand curved over her still flat stomach, made her eyes fill with tears. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who saw their partnership as sacred, who understood that her sacrifices had made his dreams possible. But as she settled into pregnancy and stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Wayne Construction, something fundamental began to shift in the delicate balance of their relationship. "Who handled the Morrison contract?" Camilla asked one evening, 6 months pregnant and enormous with twins who seemed determined to use her ribcage as a soccer field. She was reviewing the company's quarterly reports from their home office, trying to stay connected to the business that had been her passion for 4 years. Darius looked up from his laptop, and she caught something, a flicker of irritation, cross his features before he composed himself. "I did, with some help from the new office manager. Jessica Stone? Yeah, she's been incredibly helpful. MBA from USC, understands complex contract negotiations." Camilla's attention sharpened. She'd hired Jessica 3 months ago based on her impressive resume and recommendations, but something about the young woman had set off quiet alarm bells. Nothing she could point to specifically. Jessica was professional, efficient, always appropriately dressed. But there was a calculation in her dark eyes, a way she looked at Darius when she thought no one was watching. "The Morrison terms are different from what we discussed," Camilla said carefully. "The payment schedule favors the client more than necessary, and we're taking on liability that." "It's handled, Camilla." Darius's tone was sharper now, less patient. "You don't need to micromanage every decision from the couch." The words hit her like a slap. From the couch. As if her pregnancy was laziness instead of a medical necessity. As if the 4 years she'd spent building Wayne Construction from nothing could be dismissed so easily. "I'm not micromanaging. I'm trying to understand why we're suddenly accepting terms that eat into our profit margins. Because sometimes you have to take calculated risks to grow the business. Something I've learned since I started handling negotiations myself." Since he started handling negotiations himself. The implication was clear. He was doing better without her input, making decisions she was apparently too cautious or too pregnant to understand. Camilla closed the laptop slowly, her chest tight with something that had nothing to do with the babies pressing against her lungs. "I see. Look, I don't want to fight about this." Darius's voice softened, but the damage was already done. "You're supposed to be resting, not worrying about every contract detail. Trust me to handle the business." Trust him. The irony would be devastating in hindsight. Diego Alejandro Wayne entered the world at 11:47 p.m. on a rainy Thursday in October, screaming with the indignation of someone who'd been evicted from his comfortable home. Marco Luis followed 18 minutes later, quieter but equally determined, his tiny fist already reaching for his brother. Camilla held them both in her exhausted arms, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it felt like drowning. Every sacrifice, her father's disappointment, her abandoned career in international commerce, the loneliness of starting over in a foreign country, crystallized into perfect meaning as she looked at their tiny faces. "They're beautiful," Darius whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "They look just like you." For those first magical weeks, everything felt right again. Darius took time off work to help with the babies, and they existed in a bubble of sleepless joy, learning to navigate the chaos of caring for twins. Camilla nursed them while Darius changed diapers, and they took turns walking the floors during midnight crying sessions. But as the weeks turned into months, Darius's presence at home became more sporadic. Wayne Construction was busier than ever, he explained. The success they'd built together was demanding more of his time, more of his attention. Someone had to maintain the momentum, while Camilla focused on the babies. "Jessica's been invaluable," he mentioned one evening as he grabbed a quick dinner before heading back to the office for a client meeting. "She's taken on a lot of the client relations work. Honestly, I don't know how we managed without her." Camilla looked up from where she was nursing Marco, Diego sleeping in her other arm. "It's 9 p.m., Darius." "What client meeting?" "The Peterson Group. They want to discuss the timeline for the downtown project." Something about his tone felt rehearsed, but Camilla was too exhausted to pursue it. Caring for twins was like being in a beautiful, relentless war that left no energy for suspicion or analysis. She nodded and watched him leave, noting how he'd avoided her eyes. By the time the twins were 6 months old, Camilla realized she'd become a stranger in her own life. Darius left early and came home late, often smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't hers and carrying the energy of someone who'd been laughing at jokes she hadn't heard. Wayne Construction was thriving. Their biggest year yet, Darius reported with pride that felt less and less inclusive. The company she'd helped birth was growing beyond her reach, managed by people she barely knew, making decisions she wasn't consulted about. "I want to come back to work," she announced one evening as they sat in their living room, the babies finally asleep upstairs. "Part-time, at least. I can handle some of the contract reviews from home, and—" "Absolutely not." Darius didn't look up from his phone, where he was typing what looked like a very long text message. "The boys need you. And honestly, the business is running smoothly now. We've got it handled. We. Not I. We." As if she'd never been part of the equation. "Who's we, Darius?" "The team. Jessica, mainly. She's really stepped up." Jessica. Always Jessica. The woman who'd somehow become indispensable in the months since Camilla had been forced to step back. The woman who now knew more about the day-to-day operations of Wayne Construction than its co-founder. "I'd like to meet with her," Camilla said carefully. "Maybe she could come here for dinner, and we could discuss." "She's very busy. Besides, mixing business with personal isn't really her style." But it had been Camilla's style for 4 years. The business was personal. It was their shared dream, their joint creation, the foundation of everything they'd built together. That night, as Darius slept beside her, Camilla stared at the ceiling and tried to pinpoint exactly when she'd become unnecessary. When had the partnership that defined their marriage become a burden he needed to carry alone? When had her contributions been reduced to childbearing and forgotten? The answer would come soon enough, in the form of a lipstick stain on Darius's collar and a hotel receipt that fell out of his jacket pocket when the twins were 18 months old. But for now, she simply held the growing suspicion that her world was shifting beneath her feet, carried along by forces she couldn't see but could definitely feel. It was Jessica's perfume. Camilla recognized the scent immediately when she hugged Darius goodbye one morning. Chanel No. 5, the same fragrance that lingered in their home office after Jessica's rare visits to drop off contracts. The same perfume that had been clinging to Darius's clothes for weeks. Her hands shook as she fed the twins their breakfast, her mind racing through explanations that became increasingly impossible to believe. Close working relationships didn't leave perfume on shirt collars. Late client meetings didn't require the expensive cologne Darius had started wearing. That afternoon, while the babies napped, Camilla did something she'd never imagined herself capable of. She searched through Darius's jacket pockets. The hotel receipt was folded small, tucked behind his business cards like a secret he'd almost thrown away but couldn't quite manage to destroy. The Beverly Hills Marriott. Room 1247. 2 nights ago, when he'd claimed to be in a budget meeting until midnight. Camilla sat on their bedroom floor, holding the evidence of her marriage's destruction, and felt something die inside her chest. Not love, that was still there, strong and stubborn and increasingly painful. What died was trust. What died was the naive belief that their partnership was unbreakable. She could confront him, demand explanations, fight for the marriage that had once been the center of both their worlds. Or she could wait, watch, learn exactly how deep the betrayal went before she decided what to do with the knowledge. The twins stirred in their cribs, calling for their mother with the innocent urgency that had become the rhythm of her days. Camilla tucked the receipt into her jewelry box, beneath her mother's rosary, and went to care for the children who still believed their world was safe. She had no idea that in 3 years, that same hotel receipt would become evidence in a divorce proceeding that would strip her of everything except her dignity and her sons. The inciting incident wasn't dramatic, no screaming confrontations, no dramatic revelations. It was simply the quiet moment when Camilla realized that the man she'd sacrificed everything for had begun calculating whether she was worth keeping. The answer, she was beginning to understand, was no. 2 years later, Camilla stood at the kitchen window watching Diego and Marco chase each other around their backyard, their laughter carrying on the warm Pasadena breeze. At 2 years old, they were discovering independence with the fearless joy that made her heart soar and her anxiety spike in equal measure. Diego, the natural leader, would climb anything he could reach. Marco, quieter but equally determined, followed his brother's adventures with thoughtful calculation. They were beautiful children. Everyone said so. Dark curls inherited from her side, Darius's gray eyes and personalities that were uniquely their own. Watching them play, Camilla tried to remember the last time Darius had spent an entire Saturday at home to enjoy moments like this. It had been months. Jessica, I need those Riverside projections by Monday. Darius's voice carried from his home office, where he'd been on conference calls since 7 a.m. Even weekends had become work time, though Camilla noticed the work often involved long conversations with Jessica that seemed to require more laughter than business planning typically demanded. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel and walked toward the office, determined to try again. The distance between them had grown so gradually that she sometimes felt like she was looking at their marriage through the wrong end of a telescope. Everything smaller, farther away, harder to reach. Darius. She knocked gently on the door frame. The boys are asking for Daddy. Maybe we could take them to the park. He looked up from his laptop, and for a split second, she saw irritation flash across his features before he composed his expression. I'm in the middle of something important, Cam. Can it wait? It's Saturday. They're 2 years old. They won't be little like this forever. And Wayne Construction won't run itself. Some of us have to think about the future instead of just living in the moment. The casual cruelty in his tone made her step back. When had he started talking to her like she was a burden instead of a partner? When had her desire to share family time become an interruption to his important life? Of course. I'm sorry for bothering you. Jessica, hold on. Darius spoke into his phone, then covered the mouthpiece. Look, I don't mean to be short with you. It's just that this Riverside deal could set us up for the next 5 years. Some sacrifices are worth making. Some sacrifices. As if she hadn't already made every sacrifice possible. That afternoon, as she pushed the twins on swings at the neighborhood park, Camilla watched other families and tried to remember what it felt like to have a husband who participated in their children's lives. The loneliness was becoming a physical ache. Not just missing Darius, but missing the version of him who used to see her as essential instead of optional. 3 weeks later, Wayne Construction was honored at the Los Angeles Hispanic Business Association's annual gala. It should have been a celebration of everything they'd built together. Recognition for the company that had grown from their shared dreams and her father's reluctant network connections. Instead, it became the night Camilla realized her marriage was already over. She just hadn't been told yet. You look beautiful, Darius said as they prepared to leave for the event. His compliment felt automatic, perfunctory, like something checked off a mental list rather than a genuine appreciation. He'd gained weight in the past year. Success suited him physically, made him look prosperous and confident in his tailored suit. Camilla had chosen her dress carefully. Elegant black silk that skimmed her post-pregnancy figure, paired with the emerald necklace her mother had left her. She wanted to look like the successful businesswoman she used to be, not just the tired mother she'd become. Thank you. She adjusted his tie, a gesture that had once been intimate but now felt like habit. I'm excited to finally meet the team properly. It's been too long since I've been involved in company events. Something flickered in Darius's eyes. Anxiety? Guilt? Right. Well, they're all very busy people. Don't take it personally if they seem distracted. The grand ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel buzzed with Los Angeles's Latino business elite. Camilla recognized faces from her father's social circle, people who'd known her family for decades. She straightened her shoulders, calling on the diplomatic poise her upbringing had instilled, ready to represent Wayne Construction with the grace it deserved. Darius, there's our man of the hour. Camilla turned to see a distinguished couple approaching, Carlos and Maria Vasquez, who owned the largest landscaping company on the West Coast. She'd met them years ago at her cousin's wedding, before she'd ever heard of Darius Wayne. Camilla Rodriguez. Maria's face lit up with genuine warmth. I heard you married this handsome devil. Your father must be so proud of what you two have built. Actually, she goes by Wayne now, Darius interjected smoothly. And honestly, the company's success is really due to our amazing team. Speaking of which, Jessica, come meet the Vasquezes. Camilla watched in slow-motion horror as Jessica Chen materialized at Darius's side like she'd been waiting in the wings. She looked stunning in a form-fitting red dress that announced her presence to every man in the room, her smile perfectly calibrated for maximum charm. Carlos, Maria, this is Jessica Stone, our Director of Business Development. She's been instrumental in our recent growth. Director of Business Development. When had Jessica received that title? And why was this the first Camilla was hearing about it? So nice to meet you, Jessica purred, her voice carrying just enough professional authority to command respect. Darius has told me so much about your landscaping empire. I'd love to discuss potential collaborations. As Jessica smoothly inserted herself into the business conversation, Camilla found herself relegated to the role of silent wife, standing slightly behind the group, while Jessica fielded questions about Wayne Construction's strategic direction, growth projections, and client relationships. "And what's your role in the company, dear?" Maria asked Camilla kindly, clearly trying to include her in the conversation. Camilla began, but Darius answered for her. "Camilla's been focused on our family. Someone has to hold down the home front while the business grows." His tone was dismissive, as if motherhood was a hobby she'd picked up rather than a sacrifice she'd made for their shared future. "How wonderful," Maria said, but Camilla caught the slight pity in her expression. She was being introduced as a decorative wife, not as the woman who'd helped build Wayne Construction from nothing. The humiliation deepened throughout the evening. At their assigned table, Jessica sat to Darius's right while Camilla was placed several seats away, next to spouses who spoke politely about children and charity work, while the real business discussions happened at the other end of the table. "Your husband certainly seems devoted to that young woman," observed Patricia Moreno, wife of a prominent real estate developer. Her tone was carefully neutral, but her meaning was crystal clear. Camilla watched Darius lean close to Jessica during the keynote speech, whispering something that made her laugh. A throaty, intimate sound that carried more familiarity than any business relationship should warrant. Jessica's hand rested casually on his arm, possessive and confident. "They work very closely together," Camilla replied evenly, though her chest felt like it was being compressed in a vice. "I'm sure they do." When Wayne Construction was called to accept their award for outstanding Hispanic business growth, Darius walked to the stage alone. No mention of partners, no acknowledgement of the woman who'd translated contracts, networked with clients, and managed finances during their crucial early years. In his acceptance speech, he thanked his incredible team, especially Jessica Chun, whose business acumen has taken Wayne Construction to new heights. No mention of his wife. Camilla sat in the darkened ballroom, applauding her husband's success, while understanding with devastating clarity that she'd been written out of her own story. That night, after the babysitter had gone home and the twins were asleep, Camilla finally found the courage to speak the truth that had been poisoning her marriage for months. "We need to talk." Darius was in their bathroom, removing his cufflinks with the satisfied air of a man who'd had an excellent evening. "Great night, wasn't it? The award should really help with our credibility for those bigger commercial contracts. Why didn't you mention me in your speech?" "What?" He looked up, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "Your acceptance speech. You thanked Jessica. You thanked the team. You didn't mention your wife." "Cam, you're being sensitive. It was a business award for current business achievements. You haven't been involved in the day-to-day operations for 3 years. Because I was raising our children. Because you asked me to step back during my high-risk pregnancy and never invited me back in. You could have asked to come back. I did ask. Multiple times. You said the business was handled, and I should focus on the boys." Darius sighed like she was being unreasonable. "Look, I appreciate everything you did in the early days. But the company has evolved. We have professionals now handling things that used to require improvisation." Improvisation. Her MBA from Georgetown, her fluency in 3 languages, her family's business connections, all reduced to improvisation. "Is something going on between you and Jessica?" The question hung in the air like a bomb with a lit fuse. Darius's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally offense. "I can't believe you're asking me that. I can't believe I have to ask. But you spend more time with her than your own family. You smell like her perfume. And tonight you treated her like your business partner while introducing me as some housewife who stays home with the kids. Maybe because that's exactly what you are now." His voice turned cold, cruel in a way she'd never heard before. "When's the last time you brought in a client? When's the last time you negotiated a contract or closed a deal? Jessica does that. Every day. She's valuable to the business in ways that, frankly, you're not anymore." The words hit her like physical blows. 3 years of sacrifice, of putting his dreams before her own, of building a home and raising his children while he built an empire with another woman, all dismissed as worthless. I see. Her voice was steady, though everything inside her was crumbling. And what am I valuable for, exactly? You're my wife, the mother of my children. That should be enough. Should be enough for whom? For you or for me? For a woman who claims to love her family. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. He was twisting her love for their children into a weapon against her own worth, suggesting that any desire for purpose beyond motherhood was selfish. I do love our family. I love it enough to ask you directly. Are you having an affair with Jessica Chen? Darius looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact second he made his choice. Not to confess, not to fight for their marriage, but to make her the problem. You're being paranoid and jealous, and frankly, it's not attractive. Jessica is a colleague, a valuable team member. If you spent less time looking for problems and more time appreciating what we've built, maybe you'd understand that. He walked past her toward their bedroom, the conversation apparently over in his mind. But as he passed, Camilla caught it again, that expensive perfume mixed with something else. The scent of betrayal, of choices made and lines crossed. Darius? Her voice stopped him at the bedroom door. When this all falls apart, and it will fall apart, remember that you had a choice. Remember that you chose to throw away the woman who loved you enough to give up everything. He didn't turn around. Nothing's falling apart, Camilla. I'm just finally building something that doesn't need constant maintenance. As she stood alone in their bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror, Camilla realized that the woman looking back at her was a stranger. Somewhere in the past 3 years, she'd lost herself completely. Not just in motherhood, but in the gradual erosion of a marriage that had once been her foundation. The rising tension had reached its breaking point. Soon, very soon, everything would explode. But first, she needed to decide who she wanted to be when the smoke cleared. 2 months after the gala, Camilla found the pregnancy test in Jessica's purse by accident. She'd come to the Wayne construction office to pick up tax documents, a humiliating necessity since she no longer had access to the business accounts of the company she'd helped build. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Maria who still remembered when Camilla was a daily presence, had directed her to wait in the conference room while someone located the files. Mrs. Wayne, I didn't know you were coming in today. Jessica's voice carried a hint of panic as she swept into the conference room, her designer bag clutched protectively against her chest. I just need some documents for our accountant. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Of course not. Let me just. Jessica fumbled with her purse, and the contents spilled across the conference table in a cascade of lipstick, breath mints, business cards, and a small pink and white box that made Camilla's blood freeze. A pregnancy test. Still in its packaging, but the receipt stapled to it was dated yesterday. Jessica's face went white as she scrambled to gather her belongings, but it was too late. The evidence sat between them like an accusation, impossible to ignore or explain away. Jessica. Camilla's voice was deadly calm. Is there something you need to tell me? I don't know what you're talking about. But Jessica's hands shook as she shoved items back into her purse, her usual confident composure cracking like ice on a spring pond. How long? Mrs. Wayne, I really don't think. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? The question hung in the air between them, and Camilla saw the exact moment Jessica made her choice. Instead of denial or apology, her expression shifted to something colder, more calculating. The mask of professional courtesy finally slipped, revealing the predator underneath. Long enough to know that he's not happy in his marriage. The casual cruelty in her tone was breathtaking. No remorse, no shame. Just the confidence of a woman who believed she'd already won. And you're pregnant. Maybe. Probably. Jessica's smile was sharp as a blade. Darius will be so excited to finally have a child with someone who actually supports his ambitions instead of holding him back. The words hit Camilla like physical blows, but she refused to show weakness. Hold him back. I built that business with him. I gave up everything. You gave up your daddy's money, and then spent 4 years reminding everyone about your sacrifice. Do you have any idea how exhausting that gets? How tired Darius is of your constant need for recognition. Recognition? I wanted partnership. I wanted the respect I'd earned. You wanted credit for work you stopped doing 3 years ago. Darius needed someone who could actually help him grow, not someone who got pregnant and decided that made her indispensable. The viciousness in Jessica's voice revealed the depth of calculation behind her seduction. This wasn't passion or even gold digging. It was a deliberate campaign to replace Camilla in every aspect of Darius's life. You planned this. All of it. I saw an opportunity with a successful man who was outgrowing his wife. It's not my fault you made it so easy. And the pregnancy? Jessica's smile became triumphant. Insurance. Darius is traditional enough to believe that a man should marry the mother of his children, especially when that mother actually contributes to his success instead of just taking credit for past achievements. The conference room felt like it was spinning around Camilla as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This wasn't just an affair. It was a hostile takeover of her entire life, executed with surgical precision by a woman who'd studied her weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. He won't leave his sons, won't he? When's the last time he spent real time with them? When's the last time he chose family time over work? Darius loves the idea of being a father, but he's not actually interested in the day-to-day reality of it. Just like he loved the idea of having a wife who sacrificed everything for him, but he's not interested in the reality of what that sacrifice cost. Every word was carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage, and the terrifying thing was that Jessica wasn't wrong. Darius had been pulling away from the twins for months, treating them like obligations rather than joys. What do you want from me? Nothing. You're already irrelevant. I just wanted you to understand that this isn't some impulsive affair that will burn out. This is your replacement, carefully planned and executed. Darius needs a woman who can match his ambitions, not someone who peaked at 24 and spent the rest of her life living off past accomplishments. The cruelty was so complete, so devastating, that Camilla almost admired its precision. Jessica had identified every insecurity, every fear, every wound in Camilla's sense of self-worth, and had weaponized them with surgical accuracy. But as she sat there absorbing the full impact of the betrayal, something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking, something hardened inside Camilla's chest. Something that remembered who she'd been before Darius, who she'd been raised to be. You think you know him, Camilla said quietly. You think you understand what kind of man he really is underneath all that success and charm. I know he's the kind of man who chooses the future over the past. He's the kind of man who throws away anything that becomes inconvenient, including wives, including children, and eventually, including ambitious young women who get pregnant at inconvenient times. Jessica's confidence flickered for just a moment. That's different. I'm valuable to him. So was I. Until I wasn't. Camilla stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. Enjoy your victory, Jessica. But remember, you're not special. You're just next. That evening, Camilla waited until the twins were asleep before she walked into Darius's home office, with Jessica's pregnancy test in her hand. He looked up from his laptop, annoyed at the interruption, until he saw what she was holding. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, guilt, calculation, and finally defiance. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Is she pregnant? Darius set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, and Camilla saw him shifting into the cold, strategic mindset that had made him successful in business. He was going to treat the destruction of their marriage like a negotiation. Probably. And you're the father. Yes. The simple admission hit harder than elaborate denials would have. No apology, no explanation, no apparent regret. Just acknowledgement of a fact that had blown up their family. How long, Darius? How long have you been planning to replace me? I haven't been planning anything. Things just evolved. Evolved? You've been sleeping with your employee for months, she's pregnant with your child, and you think this just evolved naturally? Camilla, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You found someone younger, hungrier, more convenient. Someone who doesn't have the baggage of having known you when you were nobody. That's not fair. Fair. The word came out as a laugh that held no humor. You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything for you. My family, my career, my entire life in Santo Domingo. I worked 18-hour days to build your business. I managed our finances. I networked with my father's contacts to get you started. And the moment I needed to step back to carry your children, you replaced me. The business needed, The business needed what it always needed: my expertise, my connections, my bilingual skills. What changed wasn't the business. What changed was that you decided you deserved better than the woman who'd sacrificed everything to make your dreams possible. Darius stood, and for a moment she saw a flash of the man she'd fallen in love with, conflicted, vulnerable, aware of the magnitude of what he was destroying. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold stranger he'd become. I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You made those choices. I made those choices because I loved you, because I believed we were partners, because I thought we were building something together. We were. But people change, Camilla. Needs change. What I needed 5 years ago isn't what I need now. And what you need now is a pregnant mistress? What I need is someone who understands that success requires focus, not someone who's constantly reminding me of obligations that hold me back. Obligations? Our children are obligations. Our children deserve a father who can provide for them, not one who's torn between competing demands for his attention. The manipulation was breathtaking. He was framing his abandonment of their family as a sacrifice for their children's benefit, when everyone knew he'd simply found it more convenient to build a new life than to maintain the old one. So what happens now? You divorce me, marry Jessica, and pretend the twins don't exist? The twins will always be my sons. But they need stability, and honestly, Camilla, you're not in a position to provide that. I'm not in a position? I'm their mother. I'm the one who's raised them while you've been building your empire and your affair. You're also the one with no income, no recent work experience, and no support system in this country. Think about what's best for the boys, not what makes you feel better about your choices. The threat was clear. He would use her vulnerability against her in a custody battle, painting her as an unstable foreign woman with no means of support. The same sacrifices she'd made for their marriage would be weaponized against her in its destruction. You bastard. I'm being practical. The boys need consistency, financial security, a stable home environment. I can provide all of that. With Jessica as their stepmother. Jessica understands what it takes to succeed. She won't fill their heads with resentment about sacrifices and fairness. The casual dismissal of everything she'd given up was the final straw. Camilla had absorbed months of gaslighting, manipulation, and emotional abuse, but this, the suggestion that her sacrifices were character flaws to be hidden from her children, finally broke through her last reserves of hope. You're right, she said quietly. People do change. The man I married would never have thrown away his family for a younger woman and a business opportunity. The man I married understood honor. Honor doesn't pay mortgages or send kids to college. No. But it teaches them how to be human beings instead of just successful animals. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Camilla, I'll try to make this as easy as possible. For the boys' sake. She looked back at him one last time, memorizing the face of the man who'd convinced her to give up everything and then decided she wasn't worth keeping. The boys will remember this, Darius. They'll remember how their father chose a pregnant mistress over their mother. They'll remember what you taught them about loyalty, commitment, and love. Make sure that's a lesson you're proud of. As she climbed the stairs to check on her sleeping children, Camilla finally understood what her father had tried to tell her 5 years ago. Some men resent the sacrifices made for them because those sacrifices become mirrors reflecting their own selfishness. The midpoint revelation was complete. The game had changed entirely. Everything she'd believed about her marriage, her worth, and her future had been shattered. But sometimes, the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most powerful transformations. The question now wasn't whether she could save her marriage. It was whether she could save herself. The morning after, the eviction, Camilla woke to the sound of Diego crying. Not his usual sleepy whimper, but the panicked wail of a child who sensed something terribly wrong. Through her bedroom window, she could see a moving truck in their driveway and 2 men carrying boxes from the house. Her heart stopped. Mommy! Mommy! Marco ran into her bedroom, his face streaked with tears. Strange men are taking our toys. She threw on a robe and raced downstairs to find Darius supervising the removal of her belongings with the detached efficiency of someone managing a business transaction. 2 suitcases sat by the front door. Everything she owned reduced to what could fit in airline luggage. What are you doing? Her voice came out as a whisper, making this easier for everyone. The boys can stay here in their familiar environment while you figure out your next steps. Figure out my next steps? This is my home. These are my children. This is my house, purchased with my business income. And we both know you can't provide a stable environment for the boys right now. Jessica emerged from the kitchen carrying Diego, who was still crying but had been temporarily soothed by her gentle rocking. The sight of another woman comforting her son while her life was being dismantled around her nearly brought Camilla to her knees. "Don't touch him." The words came out low and dangerous. He was upset. "I was just trying to help." Jessica's voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes held triumph. She was already playing house with Camilla's children. "Put him down. Now. Mommy sad?" Diego reached for Camilla with chubby arms, sensing the tension but not understanding why his world was being torn apart. Camilla took her son, breathing in his familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that his father has chosen a new family? How do you tell a child that love isn't always permanent? "The legal paperwork is on the kitchen counter," Darius said, his tone businesslike. "Temporary custody arrangement, spousal support details, visitation schedule. My lawyer says it's quite generous, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering that I built this company with you? Considering that I gave birth to your children? Considering that I sacrificed everything for this family? Considering that you have no independent income and no recent work experience? Any judge will see that the boys are better off in a stable environment." The moving men returned for another load, treating her possessions like garbage to be hauled away. Her grandmother's china, the books she'd collected since college, the photos documenting every milestone of their marriage. All of it deemed disposable by the man who'd once promised to love her forever. "You can't do this. I won't let you take my children." "You're not taking them. You're being given opportunities to see them, supervised visitation, weekend custody pending your ability to provide appropriate housing." Supervised visitation. As if she were a danger to the children she'd devoted her life to raising. "Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore." His voice held no warmth, no trace of the man who'd once begged her to leave everything behind for their love. "You made your choice 5 years ago when you decided my life wasn't good enough for a Rodriguez. Now I'm making mine." The distortion was breathtaking, rewriting their history to make her the villain in their love story, as if her sacrifice had been condescension instead of devotion. Marco tugged at her robe, his little face confused and frightened. "Mommy go away?" "Just for a little while, mi amor. Just until Mommy finds a new house." But even as she said the words, she had no idea how that would be possible. No job, no savings account in her name, no credit history independent of Darius. She was 29 years old, and starting over with less than she'd had as a college student. "The boys will be fine," Jessica said softly, her hand resting possessively on Darius's arm. "I'll take good care of them." The presumption was staggering. This woman who deliberately destroyed their family was now positioning herself as their children's caretaker, as if maternal love could be transferred like a business contract. "Over my dead body." "Camilla, don't be dramatic." Darius's voice carried a warning. "You're upset, and I understand that. But threats won't help your case in family court." Family court. He was already building a narrative of her as unstable, emotional, unfit for custody. Every reaction to his betrayal would be used as evidence against her maternal fitness. The moving truck pulled away from their house, her former house, carrying the physical remnants of a life she'd believed was permanent. Standing in the driveway with 2 suitcases and no destination, Camilla felt the full weight of her vulnerability. She had nowhere to go. The Paradise Inn was anything but paradise. Located on a stretch of Sunset Boulevard that saw more drug deals than tourists, it was the kind of place where people went when they'd run out of better options. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams, and the bedspread had stains that Camilla didn't want to identify. But it was what she could afford with the emergency credit card Darius hadn't yet canceled, and it had a door that locked between her and the world that had just collapsed. She sat on the narrow bed, staring at the legal documents that had formalized her exile. Temporary spousal support of $1,500 per month. Barely enough to cover rent in Los Angeles, let alone housing suitable for children. Supervised visitation twice a week, contingent on her providing appropriate accommodations. The psychological cruelty was masterful. Darius had made it financially impossible for her to create a home stable enough to regain custody, then used her inability to provide that home as justification for keeping the children. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Diego asked for you at bedtime. I told him Mommy was on a business trip. Jessica, texting about her children like she had the right to report on their emotional state. The casual cruelty was suffocating. Not content with stealing her husband and her home, Jessica was now inserting herself into Camilla's relationship with her sons. Camilla's hands shook as she typed back, "Don't ever contact me about my children again." The response came immediately. "Our children now. Better get used to it." Our children. The possessive pronoun hit like a physical blow. Jessica was already claiming maternal authority over Diego and Marco, erasing Camilla from their lives with the same systematic precision she'd used to steal her marriage. That night, alone in a motel room that felt like the end of the world, Camilla cried until she had no tears left. For her children sleeping in their beds with a stranger putting them to sleep. For the marriage she'd believed was unbreakable. For the woman she'd been before love had made her vulnerable to this kind of destruction. But sometime in the darkness between midnight and dawn, the tears stopped. And in their place, something harder began to form. Finding work proved nearly impossible. 5 years out of the job market, with no American references and a business background tied entirely to a company she could no longer claim on her resume. Her Dominican education and her father's connections meant nothing in a job market that valued recent experience over past achievements. "I'm sorry, but we're looking for someone with more current experience in the field," became the refrain at every interview. Her MBA from Georgetown might as well have been written in invisible ink. Desperation led her to places she'd never imagined. Cleaning services that paid cash under the table. Night shifts at factories where English was optional and questions about immigration status were discouraged. Work that left her exhausted and barely able to afford the motel room that had become her entire world. The first time she put on a uniform and prepared to clean someone else's office building, Camilla caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. She was supposed to be building an empire with the man she loved, not scrubbing toilets for minimum wage while her children learned to call another woman mom. But as she pushed the cleaning cart through the empty hallways at 2 a.m., something unexpected happened. The work was honest. It was hers. No one could take away the money she earned with her own hands, the way they'd taken away everything else. And in the solitude of those night shifts, she began to remember who she'd been before Darius. The woman who'd graduated summa cum laude. The woman who spoke 4 languages. The woman whose father had raised her to believe she could conquer the world if she was willing to work for it. Twice a week, Camilla was allowed to see her children in a sterile community center room under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. The humiliation was designed to be complete, treated like a potential threat to the children she'd carried in her body and raised with her own hands. Diego and Marco were confused by the strange setting, constantly asking why they couldn't go home with Mommy, why they had to say goodbye after only 2 hours. Their innocent questions felt like knives in her chest. "Mommy, why you live in different house?" Diego asked during their 3rd supervised visit, his little hands holding hers with desperate grip. "Sometimes grown-ups have to live in different places for a while, mi amor. But Mommy loves you always, always, always. Jessica says you went away because you didn't want to be with us anymore." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. Jessica was already poisoning her children against her, planting seeds of abandonment that would grow into lifetime wounds. "That's not true, Diego. Mommy would never choose to be away from you and Marco. Never. But how do you explain adult betrayal to a 3-year-old? How do you tell children that their father chose a pregnant mistress over their mother without destroying their ability to trust love entirely? When you come home, Mommy? Soon, mi corazón. As soon as I can." But even as she made the promise, Camilla had no idea how she would keep it. The system was designed to keep her trapped, unable to afford housing suitable for children, unable to regain custody without suitable housing. Every week that passed, Diego and Marco grew more attached to Jessica and more resigned to their mother's absence. 3 months into her exile, Camilla's phone rang at midnight with news that completed her destruction. "Miss Rodriguez? This is Dr. Martinez from Cedars-Sinai. Your father has been admitted to our ICU following a serious heart attack." Don Alfonso Rodriguez, the man who'd warned her about exactly this kind of betrayal, was fighting for his life 3,000 miles away while she scrubbed floors for survival money. "How is he?" "Stable but critical. You should come as soon as possible if you can arrange it. If possible." As if crossing the country was a simple matter for a woman living paycheck to paycheck in a motel room. "I'll be there as soon as I can arrange it." But arranging it meant choosing between her father's bedside and the supervised visits that were her only connection to her children. Missing 2 weeks of visitation could be used against her in court as evidence of maternal abandonment. That night, sitting in her motel room with a one-way ticket to Santo Domingo that represented her last savings, Camilla faced the cruelest choice of all: her critically ill father or her stolen children. The darkness was complete. Everything she'd built, everyone she'd loved, every choice she'd made had led to this moment of absolute desolation. But sometimes, when you've lost everything there is to lose, you finally understand what truly matters. And sometimes, the people who love you most are waiting for you to come home, so they can help you rebuild from ashes. The darkest hour was ending. Dawn, when it came, would bring possibilities that none of them, not Darius, not Jessica, not even Camilla herself, could have imagined. But first, she had to choose whether to let her father face his recovery alone or abandon her children to the woman who'd stolen everything. Some choices change everything. And Camilla was about to make one that would shock everyone who thought they knew how this story would end. Camilla boarded the red-eye flight to Santo Domingo with nothing but a carry-on bag and a heart heavy with impossible choices. She'd left a voicemail for the court supervisor explaining the family emergency, knowing it would be used against her in future custody hearings. Jessica would probably tell Diego and Marco that Mommy had abandoned them again, adding another layer to the psychological warfare being waged for their souls. But as the plane lifted off from LAX, carrying her away from the city where she'd lost everything, Camilla felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in months, she was moving toward love instead of running from betrayal. The flight attendant, noticing her tears, offered gentle concern in Spanish. "Todo bien, señora? Mi papa está muriendo," Camilla whispered. "My father is dying. Lo siento mucho. Family is everything. Family is everything." The simple truth hit her like revelation. She'd spent 5 years trying to build a family with a man who saw people as disposable assets, while her real family, the man who'd raised her with unconditional love, was dying alone because she'd been too proud to come home. The Clínica Corazón was one of the most advanced medical facilities in the Caribbean, all gleaming tile and modern equipment. But as Camilla hurried through its sterile corridors toward the ICU, she felt like a child again, desperate to reach the one person who'd never stopped believing in her worth. Don Alfonso Rodriguez looked smaller in the hospital bed, diminished by the machines keeping him alive. But when his eyes opened and found her face, his smile held all the warmth she'd been missing for 3 years. "Mija." His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute forgiveness. "You came home. I'm so sorry, Poppy. I'm sorry for everything." "Sure." His weathered hand found hers, squeezing with surprising strength. "You have nothing to apologize for. Love makes us do brave, stupid things sometimes." "It wasn't brave. It was foolish. You were right about everything. I was right about him, but not about you. You are stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Dr. Castillo, the cardiologist, explained the situation with gentle honesty. "Massive coronary event, extensive damage, prognosis uncertain. Don Alfonso might recover, or this could be goodbye." The uncertainty was almost worse than finality. "I want to know about my grandchildren," her father said during one of his lucid moments. "Tell me about Diego and Marco." So Camilla told him. Everything. The pregnancy, the birth, the joy of watching them discover the world. But also the custody battle, the supervised visits, Jessica's psychological manipulation. Her father listened without judgment, his eyes growing sadder with each detail. "And you chose to come here instead of fighting for them. I chose to be with you when you needed me. The way you were always there when I needed you. Even when you chose him over your family? Especially then. You never stopped loving me, even when I made terrible choices. Don Alfonso was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with the intensity of a man trying to memorize something precious. Do you know what I see when I look at you now? A failure. A woman who threw away everything for a man who didn't deserve it. I see my daughter. The real one, not the frightened girl who ran away 5 years ago. You lost everything, Mija, but you didn't lose yourself. That takes a special kind of strength. The Rodriguez legacy, rediscovering her worth. During the long hours at her father's bedside, Camilla began to remember who she'd been before Darius Wayne entered her life. The Rodriguez family office occupied an entire floor of a colonial building overlooking the Malecon, and walking through it felt like stepping into a forgotten dream. Señorita Camilla, Rosa Martinez, her father's longtime assistant, embraced her with tears in her eyes. Your father talks about you every day. He's so proud of what you accomplished in Los Angeles. Proud? I lost everything, Rosa. My marriage, my children, my home. You built a multimillion-dollar business from nothing. You survived betrayal that would have destroyed weaker women. You chose love over pride when your father needed you. Those are accomplishments, not failures. Rosa led her through the offices, explaining how Don Alfonso had maintained Camilla's position as heir to the Rodriguez business empire, despite her 5-year absence. Contracts waited for her signature, decisions that required her bilingual expertise and international education. He never gave up hope that you'd come home, Rosa explained. He always said that Rodriguez women are survivors, and eventually, you'd remember that. In her father's private office, Camilla found a framed photo she'd never seen before. Herself at her Georgetown graduation, radiant with possibility and unshakable confidence. Looking at that young woman, she barely recognized herself. When had she become so afraid? When had she started believing that her worth was tied to a man's approval? The answer was painfully clear. The moment she'd allowed love to eclipse her sense of self. Word of Camilla's return spread quickly through Santo Domingo's business community. Her father's colleagues, many of whom had known her since childhood, began reaching out with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Camilla, mi nina, we heard about Alfonso. Carlos Mendoza, who owned the largest construction company in the Caribbean, embraced her like family. And we heard about your troubles in Los Angeles. That bastard doesn't deserve you. It's complicated, Don Carlos. It's simple. You're a Rodriguez. You come from fighters, builders, survivors. This setback is temporary. As the days passed, Camilla began to understand the power she'd walked away from 5 years ago. The Rodriguez name opened doors throughout Latin America and Spain. Her father's business relationships spanned industries and continents. The network she'd abandoned for love still existed, still valued her contributions, still saw her as the natural heir to an empire built over 3 generations. Your father wants to see you, Dr. Castillo said one evening as visiting hours ended. He seemed stronger today. Don Alfonso was indeed more alert, his color better, his voice clearer. Sit down, Mija. We need to discuss your future. My future is taking care of you right now. My future is making sure you understand your options. Do you want to stay in Santo Domingo? The question hung between them like a bridge to a different life. She could stay. Take over the family business, use her education and connections to build something meaningful. Let Diego and Marco visit during summers, create a life of dignity and purpose independent of Darius Wayne's cruelty. I can't abandon my children. I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm asking what you want your life to look like when you go back to fight for them. What do you mean? Right now you're fighting from weakness. No money, no support system, no legal representation that can match his resources. You're trying to reclaim your children as a victim. So what do you suggest? Go back as a Rodriguez, with resources, connections, and the confidence of a woman who remembers her own worth. Her father reached into his bedside drawer and pulled out a legal document that made her gasp. A transfer of shares in Rodriguez Industries, making her the majority owner of a business empire worth over $50 million. This has been waiting for you since you left. I never stopped believing you'd need it someday. Poppy, I can't. You can and you will. But not to get revenge on that fool who betrayed you. Do it because your children deserve a mother who knows her own power. That night, Camilla walked the Malecon alone, watching the Caribbean waves crash against the seawall her great-grandfather had built. The salt air carried memories of childhood dreams, of a young woman who'd believed she could conquer the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Diego asked if you're ever coming back. I told him some people aren't strong enough to be real mothers. Instead of the usual spike of rage and helplessness, Camilla felt something different, pity. Jessica had no idea what real strength looked like. She thought power came from stealing other women's lives, when true power came from building your own. For the first time in months, Camilla typed back, "Tell my son I'm coming home soon. And when I do, I'll be the mother he deserves, one who never gave up fighting for him." This time, Jessica didn't respond immediately. And when she finally did, her message was shorter, less confident. "We'll see." Camilla smiled, feeling something shift inside her chest. Jessica was right, they would see. But what she'd see wouldn't be the broken woman who'd been easily destroyed and discarded. She'd see a Rodriguez. And Rodriguez women didn't just survive, they thrived. The next morning, Camilla sat beside her father's bed with the legal documents that would change everything. Signing them meant accepting the responsibility of leading a business empire, of stepping into the role she'd been born to fill. "Are you sure about this, Poppy? What if I'm not ready?" "You've been ready since you were 12 years old and reorganized my filing system because you thought it was inefficient. You've been ready since you graduated at the top of your class at Georgetown. You've been ready since you built a multimillion-dollar business with a man who couldn't even read contracts in 2 languages. I failed with Darius. You trusted someone who wasn't worthy of your trust. That's not failure, that's education." Don Alfonso's hand covered hers as she signed the documents. "Now you're not just fighting for your children as their mother. You're fighting for them as Camilla Rodriguez, a woman with resources, connections, and the knowledge that she doesn't need anyone's permission to be powerful. What if it's too late? What if they've already forgotten me? Children don't forget love, my daughter. They might get confused by lies, but they don't forget the truth of a mother's heart. And when you go back to claim them, you won't be begging from a position of weakness. You'll be demanding from a position of strength." As Camilla held the papers that restored her birthright, she felt the last piece of her broken spirit click back into place. Darius had counted on her staying broken. Jessica had counted on her staying powerless, and the legal system had counted on her staying poor. None of them had counted on her remembering that she was a Rodriguez. The turning point was complete. The woman who would return to Los Angeles would be unrecognizable to the people who'd destroyed her. Not because she'd become someone different, but because she'd finally remembered who she'd always been. Powerful, connected, unbreakable, and absolutely determined to reclaim everything that belonged to her. 6 months later, the black Mercedes pulled up to the Wayne construction offices on a Tuesday morning that would reshape everyone's understanding of power. Camilla Rodriguez stepped out wearing a tailored Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair swept into an elegant chignon that framed features sharpened by purpose rather than suffering. She was no longer the broken woman who'd left Los Angeles in exile. She was the majority owner of Rodriguez Industries, with assets that dwarfed Wayne Construction's entire valuation. More importantly, she was a mother who'd remembered that dignity inherited was often more powerful than dignity earned. The receptionist, the same sweet girl named Maria who'd witnessed Camilla's humiliation months ago, nearly dropped her coffee when she recognized the woman approaching her desk. "Mrs. Wayne?" "Aye, we weren't expecting. It's Ms. Rodriguez now. I'm here to see Mr. Wayne. Tell him the mother of his children would like to discuss some business matters." Maria's hands shook as she dialed Darius's extension. Through the glass walls of his corner office, Camilla could see him lean back in his chair with that satisfied smirk that had once charmed her. He was expecting another broken confrontation from the woman he'd discarded. He had no idea what was walking through his door. Darius looked up from his desk with the condescending expression of a man who believed he held all the cards. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Los Angeles skyline that Wayne Construction had helped shape. Buildings that bore his company's signature, contracts that had made him wealthy beyond his original dreams. "Camilla, you look." He paused, clearly surprised by her transformation, but too arrogant to let it show. Different. I am different. She sat down without being invited, crossing her legs with the poise of someone accustomed to boardrooms and power plays. How are Diego and Marco? They're fine. Adjusting well. Jessica's been wonderful with them. I'm sure she has. Children are remarkably adaptable to temporary situations. Something in her tone made Darius's confidence flicker. Temporary? Everything's temporary, Darius. Success, failure, custody arrangements, business partnerships. Especially business partnerships built on shaky foundations. She placed a manila folder on his desk with the careful precision of someone laying down a royal flush. I came to discuss your future. My future is just fine, thanks. Wayne Construction is having its best year ever. Really? That's interesting because according to my sources, you're about to lose your 3 biggest contracts. Darius's face went white. What are you talking about? The Riverside Development Project. The Downtown Commercial Complex. The Santa Monica Residential Towers. All projects that were secured through my family's connections 5 years ago, when I was still naive enough to share my network with someone I thought was my partner. She opened the folder, revealing legal documents that made Darius's hands tremble. It's amazing how quickly business relationships can change when people learn the full story of how you treat your partners. You can't do this. Those contracts are legitimate. They're legitimate contracts secured through Rodriguez family connections. Connections that come with certain expectations about honor and family values. When Don Carlos Mendoza heard how you treated the woman who'd given you access to his business network, he became very concerned about Wayne Construction's corporate character. The documents spelled out the dissolution of every major contract that had built Wayne Construction's recent success. Not through any illegal manipulation, but through the simple exercise of relationship-based business practices that valued honor over profit. This will destroy me. This will humble you. There's a difference. Darius stood, his face flushed with rage and desperation. You vindictive bitch. I should have known you'd try to destroy everything we built together. We didn't build anything together, Darius. I built your company while you learned how to run it. Then you threw me away when I became inconvenient. Now I'm simply reclaiming what was always mine. The boys will hate you for this. When they understand that you destroyed their father's business out of spite. The boys will understand that their mother refused to let their father teach them that betrayal is acceptable. They'll learn that actions have consequences, and that people who break their word don't get to keep the benefits of others' trust. Camilla stood, smoothing her skirt with calm deliberation. But I'm not here to destroy you, Darius. I'm here to offer you a choice. A choice? Darius's voice cracked with desperation. Without those contracts, Wayne Construction would collapse within months. Full custody of Diego and Marco. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody with me. You get generous visitation rights, and I won't touch your remaining business relationships. And if I refuse, then every contact in my network, which spans from Mexico City to Madrid, learns exactly how Darius Wayne treats women who sacrifice everything for his success. Your reputation in the Latino business community becomes worthless. Your company dies a slow death as contracts dry up and referrals disappear. The choice was beautifully simple and devastating in its completeness. Darius could fight her and lose everything, or accept her terms and keep the remnants of his business life. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you the same consideration you offered me, a choice between what you want and what you can actually have. Darius sank into his chair, the weight of his predicament crushing the arrogance that had defined him for months. What about Jessica? What about her? She's pregnant. We're getting married next month. Congratulations. I hope you'll both be very happy together. Just not with my children. She loves them. They've bonded with her. They've adapted to her presence because children are resilient. But they haven't forgotten their real mother, despite her best efforts to erase me. Camilla's voice hardened. And frankly, a woman who seduces married men and poisons children against their mothers isn't someone I trust with my son's moral development. You can't do this. A judge will never. A judge will see a mother with substantial financial resources, international business credentials, and a stable home environment requesting custody of children who were removed from her care under questionable circumstances. They'll also see a father who threw out his wife for a pregnant mistress, then used the mother's temporary financial hardship to justify keeping the children. The legal reality was stark. With her resources restored and her character assassination defense prepared, Camilla's custody case was ironclad. I need time to think. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, the contract cancellations become permanent, and my lawyers file for emergency custody modification. That evening, Camilla returned to the Pasadena house she'd once called home. The same house where she'd been humiliated and discarded, where she'd packed her life into suitcases while another woman claimed her children. Jessica answered the door, her pregnancy now visible beneath a designer dress that probably cost more than Camilla's former monthly motel rent. Her expression mixed defiance with uncertainty. Clearly, word of the day's confrontation had reached her. Camilla, I heard you were back in town. Hello, Jessica. Congratulations on your engagement. May I come in? The formality was deliberate, a reminder that this conversation would be conducted between equals now, not between victor and victim. Jessica led her to the living room where Camilla had once nursed her babies and planned family vacations. Everything had been redecorated in Jessica's taste, modern, cold, expensive but without warmth. The family photos had been replaced with abstract art that looked impressive but felt empty. Where are Diego and Marco? Upstairs. Asleep. They have school tomorrow. Of course. I imagine this situation is disruptive for them. They're adjusting fine. Children are more resilient than people think. Yes, they are. It's amazing what they can survive when the adults in their lives behave honorably. Jessica's composure cracked slightly. If you're here to threaten me, I'm here to explain reality. Your fiancé has until 5 p.m. tomorrow to agree to custody modification, or Wayne Construction loses every major contract that's keeping it profitable. You can't destroy him out of jealousy. I'm not destroying anything out of jealousy. I'm reclaiming what was stolen from me through systematic manipulation and betrayal. There's a difference. Camilla sat forward, her voice taking on the steel her father had taught her to use in negotiations. You seduced a married man, convinced him to abandon his family, and then attempted to erase their mother from their lives. Did you really think there would be no consequences? I gave him something you couldn't: ambition without guilt, partnership without constant reminders of sacrifice. You gave him permission to be selfish. That's not love, Jessica. That's enablement. And what you gave him was better. Constant pressure to be grateful for sacrifices he never asked you to make. The psychological insight was sharp enough to sting, because it contained just enough truth to be dangerous. But Camilla had learned something in Santo Domingo that Jessica would never understand. What I gave him was genuine partnership. What you gave him was the illusion that success excused dishonor. We'll see which foundation builds a more lasting life. You're going to lose, you know. In the end, you're going to lose. Men like Darius don't stay with women who make them feel small. You're right. They don't. Which is why he'll eventually leave you too, when you become inconvenient or expensive or demanding. The only question is whether you'll understand then what I understand now, that a man who throws away family for convenience isn't worth building a life around. Jessica's hand moved protectively to her stomach. This baby changes everything. This baby makes you vulnerable to exactly the same betrayal you helped him practice on me. When you're exhausted from childbirth and focused on motherhood instead of his ego, when you're not as young or available or convenient as someone new, then you'll understand what I understood too late. The truth hung between them like a prophecy, and for just a moment, Camilla saw fear flicker in Jessica's eyes. He loves me. He loved me too. Until he didn't. That night, Camilla sat in her hotel suite at the Beverly Hills Marriott, the same hotel where Darius had betrayed their marriage, and waited for her phone to ring. At 9 p.m. it did. Mommy. Diego's voice was small, confused, but unmistakably loving. Jessica said you came to see Daddy today. Yes, mi amor. I'm staying nearby for a few days. Can we see you? The question broke her heart and put it back together simultaneously. Despite months of Jessica's psychological manipulation, despite the confusion and pain of separation, her children still wanted their mother. Very soon, Diego. Very, very soon. Marco wants to talk to you. Mommy. Mommy. Marco's voice burst through the phone with 3-year-old excitement. I lost a tooth. The tooth fairy came. Tell me everything, mi corazón. As her sons chattered about teeth and school and playground adventures, Camilla closed her eyes and let their voices wash over her like healing water. This was what she'd fought for. Not revenge against Darius or victory over Jessica, but the simple right to be present in her children's lives. Mommy, Diego's voice had gotten serious. Are you coming home soon? Yes, baby. Mommy's coming home very, very soon. At 4:47 p.m. the next day, Darius walked into the conference room of Martinez, Lopez and Associates, the law firm that now represented Camilla's interests, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 24 hours. Camilla sat at the head of the table in a black suit that made her look like exactly what she was, a woman with the power to destroy or spare, depending on her mood. I accept your terms, he said without preamble. All of them: joint legal custody, primary physical custody with you, standard visitation schedule, child support based on current income levels. And Wayne Construction's remaining contracts remain intact. Camilla nodded to her lawyer, who slid the custody modification agreement across the table. As Darius signed away his children, she watched his face for signs of the man she'd once loved enough to abandon everything. He was still there, buried beneath layers of selfishness and poor choices. But he was no longer her responsibility to save. One more thing, she said as he finished signing. I want you to understand something clearly. This isn't revenge. This is justice. You threw away a woman who loved you enough to sacrifice everything, and you did it for someone who loved your success more than your character. The consequences you're facing now are the natural result of those choices. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. I know what I lost. Do you? Because I don't think you understand even now. You lost the only woman who would have loved you when you were nobody. You lost children who would have grown up believing their father was a man of honor. You lost the respect of an entire business community that valued integrity over profit. She stood, gathering her things with calm efficiency. But mostly, you lost the chance to be the kind of man your sons could be proud to call father. Jessica might love your success, but she'll never love your character the way I did. And when that success disappears, as it inevitably will, you'll understand the difference. As she walked toward the door, Darius called out one last time. Camilla? For what it's worth. I'm sorry. She turned back, studying his face with the detached interest of someone examining a stranger. I'm not the one you should apologize to, Darius. You should apologize to your sons when they're old enough to understand what you chose over their family. And you should apologize to the woman carrying your child, because she has no idea what kind of man she's really married. The climactic resolution was complete. Justice had been served not through destruction, but through the simple restoration of natural consequences. Camilla had reclaimed her children not through vengeance, but through the patient rebuilding of her own power and worth. The woman who walked out of that conference room was unrecognizable to the broken exile who'd fled Los Angeles months ago. She was Camilla Rodriguez again, mother, businesswoman, survivor. And most importantly, she was free. 2 years later, the Pacific Palisades house was nothing like the Pasadena mansion Camilla had lost. Where that house had been about impressing others, this one was about nurturing family. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean, children's artwork covered the refrigerator, and the sound of laughter echoed through rooms designed for living rather than showing off. Diego, now 6, burst through the front door with the enthusiasm of a child who knew he was truly home. Mommy, guess what happened at school? Tell me everything, mi amor. Camilla set down her laptop. She'd been reviewing contracts for Rodriguez Industries' new Los Angeles office, and gave him her complete attention. Tommy Martinez said his dad's company might work with your company on a big project, and I told him you're the smartest business lady in the whole world. And what did Tommy say to that? He said his dad already knows that. He said everyone knows that. Marco, quieter at 5 but equally content, climbed into her lap while Diego recounted his day. The twins had thrived in the 2 years since the custody modification, blossoming into confident children who understood they were loved unconditionally by their mother. They saw Darius every other weekend, and Camilla had worked hard to ensure those visits were positive experiences. Whatever mistakes their father had made, he was still their father, and they deserved to love him without guilt or conflict. How was your visit with Daddy last weekend? she asked gently. Good, Diego said, though something in his tone suggested complexity. Jessica was sad, though. Oh, why was she sad? I think because the new baby cries a lot. And Daddy seemed tired. Camilla felt a pang of sympathy for Jessica. Not for the woman who destroyed her marriage, but for the new mother discovering what it meant to need support from a man who'd proven capable of abandoning families when they became inconvenient. Babies do cry a lot, she said diplomatically. That's normal. I'm sure Jessica and Daddy will figure it out. But privately, she knew that Jessica was learning the hard lesson Camilla had tried to warn her about. Darius loved the idea of family more than the reality of it. When romance was replaced by responsibility, when passion was interrupted by sleepless nights and diaper changes, his attention inevitably wandered. The call came on a rainy Thursday evening while Camilla was helping the boys with homework. She almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made her pick up. Camilla? It's Jessica. The voice was different from the confident woman who'd once gloated about stealing her life. This Jessica sounded exhausted, desperate, broken. Hello, Jessica. Is everything all right? I don't know who else to call. Darius left this morning. He said he needed space to figure things out. The baby won't stop crying. I haven't slept in 3 days, and I don't have any family here. The irony was staggering. The woman who'd systematically isolated Camilla from her children was now experiencing the same abandonment, with a newborn and no support system. Where are you now? At the house. Your old house. I keep thinking he'll come back, but his lawyer called this afternoon about separation papers. Camilla closed her eyes, remembering her own devastation in this same situation. The difference was that Jessica had known exactly what kind of man Darius was. She'd helped him practice betrayal, and had still believed she'd be the exception to his pattern. Jessica, are you safe? Do you have food, somewhere secure to stay? I have money for a while. It's not about that. It's just, I never thought. We have a baby together. So did Darius and I. We had 2 babies together, and he still threw us out for you. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of choices made and consequences faced. You're going to say I told you so. No, I'm not. Because there's no satisfaction in watching another woman learn the same painful lesson I had to learn. I destroyed your marriage. You participated in destroying my marriage. But Darius made the choice to let you. Just like he made the choice to leave you. I'm so sorry, Camilla. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you and your boys. The apology was 2 years too late and born from desperation rather than genuine remorse. But Camilla could hear the authentic pain in Jessica's voice. The same pain she'd felt when her world collapsed. What do you need right now? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. The next morning, Camilla did something that shocked everyone who knew her story. She drove to Pasadena with groceries, baby supplies, and an offer that redefined what grace looked like. Jessica answered the door looking like a ghost of her former self. No makeup, unwashed hair, baby spit up on her clothes, and the hollow eyes of someone who'd discovered that real life was nothing like the fantasy she'd constructed. Camilla? What are you doing here? I brought some things for the baby. And some food that's easy to prepare when you're too tired to cook. Jessica stared at the bags in confusion. I don't understand. Why would you help me? Because you have a newborn, and no one should go through that alone. Not even someone who made terrible choices. They sat in the living room where Camilla had once been humiliated, where divorce papers had been thrown at her feet. Now she was the one offering support to the woman who'd orchestrated her destruction. I know what you're thinking, Camilla said gently. That this is some kind of revenge, or that I'm here to gloat. Aren't you? 2 years ago, maybe. But I've learned something about true strength. It's not about making your enemies suffer. It's about choosing grace even when it's not deserved. Jessica held her sleeping baby, a little girl with Darius's gray eyes, and finally began to cry. I thought I was so smart. I thought I understood men like him. I thought if I was everything you weren't, he'd never leave me. What did you think I wasn't? Young enough, beautiful enough, ambitious enough, supportive enough. And now I think maybe you were everything I'm not. Strong enough, dignified enough, secure enough, smart enough to know that a man who leaves his family will eventually leave any family. Camilla looked at this broken woman holding an innocent baby and felt something unexpected. peace. Not satisfaction in Jessica's downfall, but peace in understanding that her own journey had led to wisdom Jessica was just beginning to grasp. Can I tell you something, Jessica? Something I wish someone had told me when I was making desperate choices for love. What? You can't build lasting happiness on the foundation of someone else's pain. What you and Darius built together was constructed on betrayal, lies, and the destruction of a family. That kind of foundation was never going to hold. So what do I do now? You learn. You grow. You become the kind of woman who builds her own life instead of stealing pieces of someone else's. Word of Camilla's support for Jessica spread through Los Angeles's business community like wildfire. The woman who'd had every right to celebrate her enemy's downfall was instead offering practical help during a vulnerable time. I don't understand it, Maria Vasquez confided over lunch. She could have let that woman twist in the wind after what she did to her family. She could have, Camilla agreed. But my sons are watching how I handle victory. Do I want them to learn that strength means kicking people when they're down, or that it means offering grace even to those who wronged us? But she destroyed your marriage. My marriage was destroyed by my husband's choices. Jessica was just the weapon he chose to use. And now she's a single mother with a baby, learning exactly what I learned 2 years ago. The community's reaction ranged from admiration to bewilderment, but Camilla's children understood perfectly. Why did you help Jessica, Mommy? Diego asked one evening. Because sometimes being strong means helping people who hurt us, especially when they're sorry and trying to do better. Even though she was mean to you? Even though she was mean to me. Because the kind of person I want to be is someone who chooses kindness over revenge. Will Daddy come back to her? Camilla considered the question carefully. I don't know, mi amor. But I hope that whatever happens, your baby sister has a good life with people who love her. Baby sister? Jessica's baby is your half-sister. She's part of your family now, whether you see her often or not. The boys processed this information with the adaptability of children who'd learned that families could be complicated, but love didn't have to be. 5 years later, the Rodriguez Industries LA office occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Camilla had conquered twice, once through love and once through reclaimed power. As CEO of the fastest-growing international construction and development firm on the West Coast, she'd built something that belonged entirely to her. Diego, now 11, and Marco, 10, had grown into confident young men who spoke 3 languages, understood the value of hard work, and had never doubted their mother's love. They spent summers in Santo Domingo with their grandfather, who delighted in teaching them about business, honor, and the Rodriguez legacy they would inherit. Don Alfonso, who'd survived his heart attack and thrived in his daughter's success, visited quarterly to marvel at what his prodigal daughter had accomplished. You've built something extraordinary, Mija, he said during his latest visit, watching his grandsons negotiate with contractors in perfect Spanish about a playhouse construction project. We built it together, Poppy. Your lessons, your connections, your belief in me when I'd forgotten how to believe in myself. And what about Darius? Any regrets? Camilla considered the question as she watched her sons direct workers with natural authority. No regrets about losing him. Only gratitude for what loving him taught me about my own strength. Darius had never returned to Jessica, who'd moved back to San Francisco with their daughter and started a small consulting firm. They'd divorced quietly, and he'd moved to Phoenix where Wayne Construction operated on a much smaller scale. He saw the boys regularly and had learned to be a better father in smaller doses, though he'd never regained the empire his choices had cost him. And Jessica? She sends Christmas cards. Updates about little Sophia. She's doing well, better than I expected. Turns out losing everything taught her the same lessons it taught me. The call came on a Tuesday morning that would become legendary in Los Angeles business circles. Darius's voice was barely recognizable, weak, frightened, humbled in a way Camilla had never heard. Camilla? I need to ask you something. Something I have no right to ask. What is it, Darius? I'm sick. Cancer. The doctors say it's advanced, and the treatment is expensive, and my insurance. His voice broke. I don't want to die estranged from my sons. The man who'd thrown her out of their home, who'd replaced her with a younger woman, who'd used her sacrifices against her in court, was asking for mercy from the woman he'd betrayed. What do you need? I need the boys to remember me as more than the man who broke up their family. And I need to know that someone who understands honor will make sure they know I loved them, even when I was too selfish to show it properly. That afternoon, Camilla sat in the oncology ward of Cedars-Sinai with the man who'd once been the center of her universe. Chemotherapy had stolen his hair and 20 pounds, but more importantly, it had stripped away the arrogance that had defined his downfall. Why? He asked as she arranged for specialists, updated insurance coverage, and coordinated treatment schedules. Why are you helping me after everything I did to you? Because our sons love you. Because your daughter Sophia deserves to know her father. And because grace isn't about what people deserve, it's about what we choose to give. I destroyed everything good in my life for a woman who left me the moment things got difficult. You made choices based on what you thought would make you happy. You were wrong about what happiness looks like, but that doesn't make you unredeemable. I never deserved you. No, you didn't. But you deserved the chance to become worthy of love. You just chose a path that led away from it instead of toward it. Diego and Marco spent their father's last months learning about forgiveness, grace, and the difference between love and enabling. They watched their mother care for the man who'd abandoned them, not because he deserved it, but because love, real love, transcended the wounds it had suffered. When Darius died, peaceful and surrounded by family, his sons remembered him not as the man who'd chosen a mistress over their mother, but as the father who'd taught them, through his mother's example, that redemption was always possible through grace. The funeral was small but meaningful. Jessica came with Sophia, now a beautiful 5-year-old with her father's eyes and her mother's resilience. The two women who'd loved the same flawed man stood together at his graveside, united not by competition but by the understanding that they'd both learned essential truths about love, loss, and the power of forgiveness. Thank you, Jessica whispered as mourners dispersed. For everything. For showing me what real strength looks like. Take care of Sophia, Camilla replied. She's a good girl. She deserves to know she comes from love, not from mistakes. Years later, when business magazines wrote about Camilla Rodriguez's rise to international prominence, they focused on her business acumen, her innovative approach to sustainable development, and her role in transforming LA's skyline. But those who knew her story understood that her greatest achievement wasn't the empire she'd built. It was the grace she'd shown in victory, the dignity she'd maintained in defeat, the love she'd chosen over revenge, even when revenge would have been justified. Her sons grew up to be men who understood that true strength came not from never falling, but from how you treated others when you had the power to destroy them. They learned that honor wasn't about never making mistakes, but about owning those mistakes and working to repair the damage they caused. And in boardrooms from Los Angeles to Santo Domingo, in business schools where her case studies were taught, and in the hearts of women who faced their own betrayals, Camilla Rodriguez's story became something greater than a tale of personal triumph. It became proof that grace, wielded by a strong woman who knew her worth, could transform not just her own life, but the lives of everyone touched by her choices. The woman who'd lost everything and rebuilt it from ashes hadn't just reclaimed her power. She'd redefined what power meant. Not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to transform them through unexpected mercy. In the end, that was the shock that left everyone speechless. Not revenge or destruction, but grace so powerful it healed wounds no one thought could heal. And if you've made it this far in Camilla's incredible journey, I hope her story reminds you that setbacks aren't endings. They're setups for comebacks that can change everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Camilla's situation? Would you have shown the same grace? And don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things when life tested their limits. Because we all have more strength than we know. Sometimes we just need to lose everything to remember how powerful we really are.